such a fine balance, isn't it? There's stuff you do want parents to know and be informed about. I'm never going to sit here as a dietitian and judge the choices parents make for their children. But I think it is really, really important that parents are able to make an informed choice, and informed without bias, informed without the packaging, the people who want to sell you their supplement, without the bias, because all of that feeds into it and people don't realize. It's that fine line of going, here's the information, but also, that doesn't mean that's what you need to do all of the time. Let's remember food is also about joy and connection.
Welcome to the Don't Feed the Fear podcast, where we dive into the complex world of food allergy anxiety. I'm your host, Dr. Amanda Whitehouse, food allergy anxiety psychologist and food allergy mom. Whether you're dealing with allergies yourself or supporting someone who is, join us for an empathetic and informative journey toward food allergy calm and confidence. Welcome back to our summer season of Don't Feed the Fear, where we are starting some conversations about choices, the choices that we make, the choices that we lose, and the choices that we sometimes have to intentionally reclaim when we're managing food allergies. I wanted to introduce you to today's guest early in the season because I think she brings a lot to the table that can help us rewrite and reframe some difficult perspectives and experiences that we have around food. I'm so honored to have chatted with Lucy Upton, whose approach is a beautiful reminder that even within the limits of dietary restrictions, we still have plenty of choice, much of it not even having to do with what the food we're putting in our mouths is. Her warm, balanced philosophy shows that managing allergies doesn't have to feel like deprivation or fear, and we don't have to have a negative relationship with food. We can find a path toward nourishment, connection, and joy. Lucy is a leading pediatric dietitian and nutritionist in the UK with a huge social media following and an amazing new book that just came out. If you already follow her, you know how well-informed and accessible and practical her work is. Lucy's very grounded in the experiences that we are actually having related to food, nutrition, allergies, eating difficulties, growth concerns, and that shows in the way that she communicates with us. That's why I was so excited for her book, and it did not disappoint. Thank you so much for being here to join me, Lucy. I just finished your book this weekend. I'm so impressed. I want to tell everybody all the wonderful things about it, but I would love to let you start by introducing yourself to everybody and telling us about this great new book that's out.
Hello, everyone, and so lovely to speak to you. Honestly, such a pleasure. So my name's Lucy. I'm a children's dietitian. I've always been a children's dietitian. I've been working over 15 years now in clinical practice. I have, I suppose, by what we would consider in the UK, a fairly typical start in that I spent a long time working for our National Health Service. So I did over 10 years for our National Health Service, always working with children in a range of different settings. I did a lot of food allergy, which is one of the reasons I'm here today, but actually did a lot of a sort of wide range of clinical nutrition in some of our biggest children's hospitals in the UK. So kind of have a very sort of that hands-on acute experience and worked with lots of families. But alongside that, have always, I suppose, had, for want of a better term, had my finger in other pies in terms of recognizing that reaching lots of parents, has a different method these days. So I think it was lockdown actually, where I started an Instagram page because I thought, oh my God, where are parents going to get all of their information from? Now they can't access anybody. So that was kind of the birth of the children's dietitian, really, and just wanting to get evidence-based information out there for parents. In a particularly noisy environment, I was finding parents with the rise in social media were getting more confused, more conflicted. And I suppose also born out of the fact that particularly here in the UK, because of the way our healthcare system works, had a lot of very vulnerable parents. So children with, suspected allergies, babies with feeding difficulties, really stressful feeding experiences on very long waiting lists to be seen by our health service. And essentially how it works in the UK is if you're going to go sort of privately in the UK, some people will have insurance, often through work, but most people don't. And so most people, have to either pay for that themselves or they have to wait. And, I'll never forget a mum messaging me once being like, oh, I've just had a, really, really complex allergy baby. And I've just had the letter through and the wait's 94 weeks. And I was, even in my head, I was like, that's like, hold on a minute. That's like nearly 2 years. Which is just wild, isn't it? So yeah, so was born the children's dietitian. And so I do sort of work online. I do my own clinics. I work at a specialist feeding clinic. I consult with brands in food industry. I'm very lucky. I get to really diversify kind of what the role of a dietitian does. And yes, a couple of years ago, was it a year ago? But a year and a bit ago, I was approached by a publisher here in the UK to write a book, which kind of set the wheels in motion for my book, The Ultimate Guide to Children's Nutrition, which I wanted to do something a little bit different. I very much realized for parents that there's some brilliant books out there, some really wonderful books about key timeframes with feeding. Like there's lots of books about weaning and introducing solids, and there's certain books around kind of managing specific scenarios. We have an abundance here. I'm sure it's the same over there of like recipe books. And it was like I could do this, but actually what I wanted was a bit of a I suppose a bit of a handbook for those first 5 years, not only because we recognize that's probably one of the most formative times for sort of establishing children's kind of health and relationship with food, but also because, especially, I'm since become a mum, everything changes so quickly, doesn't it? You're like, you just about got to grips with milk feeding, and they're like, oh, hello, now it's time to introduce solids. And you're sort of getting your head around solids, and you finally got a little one who might be eating and exploring food, and then bam, the toddler years, and you're like, whoa. So I wanted something that answered all the questions, that was very much driven by my community. Actually, I you'll have seen at the back of every section there's like a common Q&A, and that's from 5 years, nearly 6, I think, of doing every Sunday pretty much, doing a Q&A on Instagram. I just got all of those amalgamated, the things people ask me time and time again, and I was like, if one parent's asked, in fact, if 25, 30, 100 parents have asked, then many more want the answer to this. So I threw it all in a book. So very long, convoluted hello.
Thank you. And I didn't want to try to sum it up. I've been
Yeah.
struggling to try to put into words how your book is different from everything that's out there. So thank you for
Yeah.
doing that for me.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Oh, I got well versed in this now.
There's so much of that I want to pull out, but you said something that I think is so important about that, how things change so quickly. And it's a half-life of medical information, especially within allergies, just shrinking and shrinking. And then that's how mothering is. As soon as you finally settle into a phase like, oh, I've got this, and now I know the routine,
Yeah.
things change again. So with food on top of that, it's so difficult to manage. I'm so sad for myself that I didn't have this when I was going through it, because
I've had a few messages along the same lines, actually.
yes, and I want everyone to know that this is a book for everybody that
Mm.
will leave you prepared, whether allergies or not are in your future, when you need the information, which is before it happens, not after your child has had a reaction and you're panicking.
That was what I wanted. I wanted something preemptive. I wanted, I get so, for example, the toddler years and eating habits in the toddler years is a really common area of concern for lots of lots of parents, in fact. And I was like, I just want a book that's going to like set out what's going on for your child's development. Like, why are these things happening? Because the why always helps, doesn't it? It takes away from that, God, there must be something wrong. I must be doing something wrong, to, oh, right, I almost can anticipate. And if I know that this is going to happen, I'm not going to jump to fix, which is so often our instincts as a parent, isn't it? Like, oh my God, this is different. This is worrying. Is this normal? Oh my gosh, I must fix it. And actually, therefore, in the hope that actually it just gives lots of parents peace of mind, it gives somewhere to turn to. I sort of said at the end, I hope it's well thumbed and passed on, and that it's been there in those, not just for the preemptive, but also for those tricky moments. And that comes to allergies too. I made sure I covered lots in there about introducing allergens to babies and why we would do it, but also pragmatically, not just why we do it, but like, here's some ideas of how to do it. Here's some foods you can keep in. This is what you might do, like very pragmatically, sort of step by step. And, what do reactions look like? And clearing up also, I think, quite a lot of that misinformation that surrounds food allergies in those early years, which, after working in this area for a very long time, I sometimes smile. I'm like, I'm still hearing the same thing I was hearing 15 years ago. It takes in the same way, like you were talking about the half-life of information, it takes a long time for some things to just disappear, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes, unfortunately. So for example, one of the most important things that you talk about in your book that was not information that was available to me is how important it is in reducing food allergies is the early introduction of foods.
Yeah.
And that information is out there, but how to do this and the way you set up your book and the support you give around it, removing the judgment and the should and all of the fear
Rules.
that we feel around it, right? Because it
Yeah.
becomes a scary thing. Oh my gosh, if I don't give my child peanut butter by this many months, they're going to
Mhm.
develop an allergy. That's what I think people hear,
Yeah.
and that's why I think it doesn't disseminate the way that we want it to, or be incorporated the way that it ought to be.
No, and I still think there is fear. I still think, even with all that information, I kind of like these there's different groups of parents. It's the sort of parents who sort of still haven't got access to that information because they've been misinformed by even other health professionals who've worked a long time. And this stuff takes a long time to trickle down. I remember being sat in a lecture here in the UK when some of the big pinnacle studies that came out about allergy prevention were first being discussed, like two health professionals, and everyone's mind, like the silence in the room, like, and one of the first questions from a pediatrician was, how are we getting this to public health level, and how are we doing it quickly? And the reality is that we're 12 years on, and we're like still feeding this information. So some people are still going to get it after they need it, or, and that isn't anyone's fault necessarily, but it is important, as to why it's really important to get kind of widespread, information out there that's accessible to families. And as you say, supportive, not judgmental. And I think also, challenging some of those fears, if we're talking specifically about kind of introducing food allergens during weaning, which, by the way, it is totally normal to be worried about. I was worried about it, and I've been there, done it, got the t-shirt in terms of giving the advice. I could do it probably in my sleep, but I was still like, I think I'll just call my sister and see if she wants to come around today, because my husband was away. I think, and even though my logical brain, my adult logical brain, like prefrontal cortex, fully online, can say risk of anaphylaxis, very low, like
Right.
very low. And that's what most people are worried about, right? A really big reaction first time. And, and also I would know what to do if she was having a reaction. And I'm also very confident with knowing what I'm looking for and how to like set about my day. My emotional brain still took over, right? It works so much faster, not necessarily logical at all. And it was like, oh my God, imagine something horrendous happens. And I think it's then about recognizing the ways. I think sometimes as parents, we can forget that sometimes one of the best things we can do for our kids is think about how we emotionally reinforce ourselves in certain moments and with certain things. Because, the village isn't there necessarily like it used to be, I don't feel. That might be my personal experience, but it's certainly the experience I hear of lots of parents and lots of mothers. And I also think, I don't know if you agree, that we sort of, people don't ask for help as much anymore. People are reluctant, even I am, even though are reluctant to say, I need to lean on you, I need to ask for some help, can you come? And because everyone is busy and has their own lives and thinks that, actually they don't want to be a burden. I hear that a lot. I don't want to be a burden.
I agree. I see that so much. I went to a baby shower this weekend, and there were the little cards on the table, some advice for the new mother. And I wrote, let people help you, because I think we don't. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because it wasn't intentional. But the day that I first gave my son peanut butter and he reacted, my sister happened to be at my house. She doesn't live locally. I wonder, looking back, like if there was a part of my brain that felt brave enough to do it that day because
She was there
without me planning it that way. Yes. But
Yeah.
you make such a good point. We have to find the supports around us and not be afraid to lean on them, because we would offer the same support to anyone else in an instant, all of us.
What I say all of the time. I'm like, turn around and I say, for these people, would you? And everyone's like, oh my God, in a heartbeat. I think the other thing actually, which often isn't spoken about widely, but I talk to a lot of my families about, this is, again, some of this is just sort of not necessarily, like in a scientific paper somewhere, but very much the kind of practice-based evidence, is that I find a lot of the burden of, so if we're talking about introducing allergens in the UK, that would very often fall to a mother who would be on maternity leave because, dad will be back at work, for example, because standard leave is 2 weeks paternity here and then they've got back. It falls very much, to women who are also probably doing a million other things, who, might be having challenges with their own mental health, who might be carrying a huge mental load. And actually, this is another thing to do. And actually, I talk quite a lot to families, when I'm talking to mothers, often on calls, or they're the only one there with their baby in clinic, for example, like about how, if you struggle to advocate for yourself, how can we empower the other people around you to help advocate for you and your son or daughter? But I think it's just sort of a nod to the fact that sometimes it's, we're struggling to, we need to ask other people to help hold some space too, or help open those doors and push open those doors, or take control of something for us. And that is all, again, that's part of that asking for help. But supporting other people around you to advocate can be really, really helpful when you're a new mother.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're saying that. And I hope everyone listening is hearing and remembering all stages of life, not just when you're in your mother. Because as we said, each phase changes and there are new challenges ahead just when you think you've got it.
No one feels like they're nailing it for very long. I'm sure I eat my words every time. I'm like, oh, I feel like we just got our heads around this. And I'm like, Oh, give it 48 hours now. I've set the timer off. I've said it out loud
Wait,
now.
I shouldn't have said it out
Yeah.
loud.
Yeah. I think I literally said it a few days ago, with with our daughter. I was like, "Oh, everyone calls it the terrible twos," and I don't love that label actually,
Right.
because I think it preempts negativity. And actually, when you understand what toddler's brain is doing, actually you can view it for such a different lens and with so much empathy, and you feel so much more empowered as a parent. But generally, what I was using it in the context of, actually, I don't think she has, that many tantrums, and actually, we're doing all right. I think, we've been luck of the draw, of course, and very much eaten my words this last weekend. So, and yes, again, I am humbled by my small human.
Well, and speaking of tantrums, and you touched on this
Yes.
before, with when we know something, but that doesn't mean that the fear won't take over. I was so excited about your book, but I was the most excited when you started acknowledging and talking about the role of the nervous system, because that hijacks everything else, our knowledge, our experience. What do you think is the most important piece of this for people to understand in terms of that role of the nervous system?
God, it's hard to niche it down, isn't it? I think there's a few points. I think even just that awareness of what is going on in our own nervous system, but also what's going on in the nervous system of our children around eating. And actually, this feeds into, if you've got a child who's refusing food, or you're having a tricky time around the table, but also it really feeds into our food allergy children and our food allergy parents. Because actually, I can almost see it when parents come in to see me, that they are in a constant state. And this isn't necessarily just newly diagnosed either. You know, that nervous system is on the brink of, or tipping over into, kind of fight or flight, dysregulated, not okay. And you can see that. I think we can see that from we're all aware of that from the people around us. Oh my gosh, they seem short today. Oh my, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. So often it can feel a bit finger pointy, can't it? Whereas actually, again, I think viewing kind of us as parents, both the way we look at ourselves and are kind to ourselves, but also thinking about the impact on children, is that, actually, if our nervous systems are not okay because of, let's look at food allergies. So, introducing new foods, during weaning, or offering something new to your child before you might have checked the label 3 times, but they've still never eaten it before. Your nervous system is probably not going to be super relaxed, chilled, nice green zone, calm and regulated. You're probably going to be dysregulated. You're probably going to be feeling that adrenaline pumping, that fight or flight sort of kicking in. I think what's worth acknowledging there, and again, I talk to parents a lot about this, is actually in those moments, parents will say to me, it's like I'm looking for anything, like they itch their nose. And I'm like, yeah, that's the hypervigilance that comes with all that adrenaline slamming around your body. The thing that's meant to make us know which way to run, what's the safest, quickest thing I can do to get out of this scenario, and that fight or flight, or how am I going to make sure I dodge all of these punches, or whatever it might be. It's the equivalent. You are going to look at everything. You are going to be hypervigilant about everything. You might fly off the handle when you're desperate for them to consume a food on the milk ladder and they reject it that day, because you really needed it in that moment, and your nervous system is up here. And actually, I think it's just not talked about enough. I don't think we kind of recognize in ourselves that we're not okay. But I talk to parents a lot about it in the context of, actually, particularly with young children who are not good at regulating their emotions, may not have the literacy to label them yet, cognitively, or even language. There's very much a figure of 8, and I talk to parents about, at the table, insert any scenario that might feel frustrating, anxiety provoking, etc., or might just agitate us, might activate us at the table, like when your child refuses food for the 3rd day in a row, or you spent ages making a meal and it's gone, and we're activated and we're pushing ourselves. As soon as you're not okay, they're probably not going to be okay. It won't take long. And it's like a figure of 8. Like, if I'm okay, we do this constant check-in. I'm okay, you're okay. I'm okay, you're okay. And that's lovely. Imagine that, nice and flowing. You're okay, I'm okay. The moment, and it can go either way with a child and a parent. If parent not okay, child probably going to pick on that quite quickly. Young children are very receptive, and not necessarily through what even we say, our tone of voice, our tension, how we hold ourselves, our behaviors. We might become frantic, we might get in their space. And if we're not okay, they're going to pick up on that and they're probably going to sense threat too. And in those moments where a child is perceiving, oh my God, my mum is not okay, I'm assuming something in my environment is not safe. That feeling of felt safety at this table right now, gone. And it can work the other way. So child not okay in whatever way, might do something, say something, not be okay. Parent won't be okay because you're swooping in, and it's just being aware of that. And I always lay that foundation with, this isn't me saying, why aren't you cool as a cucumber every time?
Right, just calm down.
Yeah. That's okay. But it's being aware of that and being okay to give yourself permission to go, okay, what am I going to do about this? How might I approach this next time once I've had time to think about this? And also, I think I wrote this in the book, like having some empathy for our children, and that won't happen at the time whilst we're in the red zone, and won't happen whilst we're agitated, but often coming back afterwards and being like, oh yeah, do you know what? That was probably really hard work for them. And actually I was asking them to try this food and I was getting quite upset, but also, they were knackered after school. Actually, they had 3 bowls of cereal this morning. Maybe they weren't even hungry, but that only works when that lovely logical brain, that reasoning, that thing that we can do with our adult developed brains comes into play. And actually for children, that's not going to be the case either. I don't know what you think, but I often find that it's really easy for us as parents to forget that we're not just dealing with small adults. We're dealing with like humans, small humans, and they are very different in their development. Their brain is developed differently and wired differently at this stage in terms of their capacity for certain things. And I say the same with nutrition. We're not dealing with small adults. We're dealing with this kind of unique, tiny human.
Right, still developing and
Still,
so dependent on us. And you described it so beautifully. My favorite word, which you do use in the book, that co-regulation.
yeah,
And instead of so desperately wanting when we are not in a good state, we want them to be okay so that we can feel better. It works in the opposite direction every single time. And it's so easy to say, but so difficult to do.
Oh, in the moment, because in the moment we can't think logically either. We're not thinking with our front brain. Biology is taking over. I say, give yourself a break. Like at the moment, it doesn't matter what has activated you, what the worry has been, where your nervous system is, but like giving yourself a hard time for it isn't going to be helpful. Even though we all do it, just I should have been calmer, like I should have been X, which is why I wanted to put it in, because the more we understand about it, the more we can kind of approach ourselves and our children with more empathy, more understanding, and also think about what we can do to safeguard and put in place things that might help, because that's what the next bit is, right? Is
Right.
what can we do next?
Right, to prepare for the next time, learn from the experience. The more we beat ourselves up, the more our nervous system stays in fight or flight, because it's just like someone else attacking us.
And then when the more we do that, the more those lovely neuron pathways in the brain fire quickly down what we're really familiar. We are what we habitually do, including what we habitually think. And I always say to parents, whenever we're really sort of putting a plan in place around kind of perhaps, thinking about meal times or thinking about something food allergy related, like approaching a ladder or introductions, is that actually we are going to have to rinse and repeat the stuff that goes well. And that's going to feel harder. That's going to feel like, when you go on a walk and you're like, I think there's a path that way. Like I can kind of see it's there. It has been trodden before, but there's only a little bit of flattened grass. Whereas actually, the well-paved path with a clear "this way, please" might be the thing that we've been doing for months, years, and it can be really hard to try and navigate a different way. It takes time, and it takes effort and energy, which classically as parents we don't have lots of.
Right. You said it very well earlier. We do know. We notice when people are off. We pick up on it because our nervous systems are wired to notice it. It's just changing the perspective about it. Instead of, like you said, pointing fingers, it's recognizing and responding accordingly. That's the shift, knowing that that's information that person is giving us, including, like you said, our child, recognizing where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, exactly everything that you say, like no finger pointing, no blame, because actually parents carry a lot of blame, especially when we're thinking about food allergies. Like I really want to put that kind of lens on for a minute. I hear, from diagnosis, often with parents and particularly mothers, a lot of self-blame talk. Is it because I did this in pregnancy? Is it because I didn't, breastfeed? Is it because I ate this whilst I was breastfeeding? Is it because I didn't do this? Is it because, do you know what I mean? Like that's understandable. I think that's quite a natural search for like this really hard thing has happened to me and my child. And I wouldn't choose for this to be happening. And I'm kind of processing that. But women in particular, again, and that's very much backed by research, is that very good at turning the lens inwards and going, God, it must be something I've done wrong. And that is a mixing pot, therefore, of emotions, of blame, of shame, and then a sort of a franticness to want to fix it. And that can be really, really, sometimes we'll just spend a bit of time in an appointment just dealing with that bit, and recognizing that there are things that we can control as parents. Equally, there are many things that we can't. Even if we look at something like allergy risk, you can't control if you've got a genetic predisposition to atopy in your family. I have one of those in my family and we carry it. And I was having a conversation with my mum actually about that, because my sister's had some quite major surgery recently because of a genetic thing that's been passed down. And my mum was talking about with guilt and blame and these feelings, and I said, oh, it's interesting, would you feel guilty, would you feel guilt or blame if we were talking about the fact we've all got hay fever? We do, we're like a really atopic family, we all got hay fever and pollen food syndrome and stuff like that. Do you feel guilty about that? And mum was like, no. But there's so much of a genetic element to that. It's just the way, you don't give yourself a hard time for one thing, but you do for another, even if they're similar. It's interesting. But, I think that self-empathy, that being aware and then being informed can really, really help in terms of what the journey looks like ahead for you and your child.
Definitely. This is where we teeter on all the things that we know and we should be doing, then create the guilt and the shame. But, what you're saying is about creating this good foundation for food introduction and eating for the rest of our lives. And of
Mhm.
course, you talk about like the gut microbiome, all of these things that we're talking about that sound like they sound behavioral, they sound mental health, they sound social, emotional, but they have biological ties. Like when we talk about fight or flight, the
Mhm.
body's state of calm is rest and digest.
Mhm.
So literally to digest our food and to create healthy guts, we have to spend time in the rest and digest state, right? That shapes our gut microbiome. The gut
Mhm.
microbiome can't develop healthy if we are in fight or flight all the time.
No, 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 no. And it's well shown. It's well shown to not, or there'd be differences. But again, I think we talked about this initially, didn't we? When I was sort of writing the book, and I was very much sort of staunchly quite firm when I was speaking to my publisher at the beginning and just being like, we want a book about nutrition. We want a book about feeding kids. And I was like, we really want that nutrition lens because there's so much misinformation and so much to wade through out there. And I was like, oh, well, absolutely do that. It's great to inform parents on things that can support a healthy gut microbiome, brain development, all those foundations, those nutritional foundations. But the foundations also look like what feeds their future in other ways in terms of how we feed children. Because a child could have the healthiest, by the very define healthy, right? But healthiest diet ever. But if they have a terrible relationship with food alongside those things that they eat, actually, is that a healthy diet? And I think I really wanted to kind of make sure that it do both, because then you can make informed decisions. And I think that is what is really, really important for parents, is that everything you do is about, we're constantly wading through information at the moment. And when you're a parent, oh my God, I remember as soon as I was pregnant, like my algorithms on everything changed. And you're like, boom, 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 boom. And I was like, oh my God, so much decision making do we do? Even like, what blooming pram do I buy? God, could someone just, and you go, can someone just tell me what to do? Could you just tell me the best pram to get within this price range, please?
Right.
Like, because it is constant decision making, even before your baby's here. There's so much sense of responsibility about getting everything right. And I think I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that, there are foundations for nutrition, but right looks different for every family. I think I ended the book just saying, health looks different for everybody. This is here so you can pick and choose and be aware and make the decisions that feel right for you as a family, and also know how to navigate when things don't feel like they're going, quite right, and be aware of that. But health looks different on everybody. And it's deciding what's important for you. It's making yourself aware so you can pick, move, and choose. So much of what I see in the nutrition world at the moment is polarizing. we're back to good or bad. I really fear for children growing up at the moment who have access to this information via social media, because very, influential people, largely with large voices, not necessarily medical, robust nutritional background, for example, making really bold claims about things that are making people feel fear around food again, and I worry for it, but also very loud voices that are very good at selling things that they shouldn't be selling. I see the amount of things that, if I put my, again, food allergy lens on, the amount of unregulated, unvalidated testing that I see people doing, spending tons of money on. Send your hair off for this, send a blood sample for this, and we're testing for this. And I just don't know, I want to lobby these with every ounce of my being, because I see parents literally flushing money down the toilet, but also I'm getting children down the line who've had all of these foods cut out. Funnily enough, their symptoms haven't resolved because there's no validation. A parent who's just completely lost with what to do, and actually missed opportunities along the way because they've gone with something that somebody has been very confidently selling to them, and is preying. It's preying on parental anxiety and the want to get everything right, and the unknown. As parents, when we don't know what's going on with our children, we want an answer, and we want it sharpish, don't we? And I just, things like that. Lots of excessive supplementation I now see being sold online, and all of these things. I see lots of sort of gut heals, I'll cure your child's eczema with a gut heal, and I'm like, there's no evidence base for that. And it makes me so, obviously activates me as a health professional, because I just think, please don't do that. Even as health professionals, we always do our best with the information we have at the time. And I think this is the thing, is that the science is still evolving. The science of food allergy, very much evolving. It's fascinating watching it all come out. Things have changed even in the last 10, 15 years. The same goes with, parenting and understanding brain development, microbiome, all of this is moving. And so we're trying to keep as up to date as possible. But that also means that sometimes when we're, parents are desperate for answers, we can never give a black and white. We have to be quite nuanced. My favorite phrase as a dietitian, like, it depends. And that's frustrating. It doesn't sell on TikTok. It depends, let me tell you. It doesn't, so I just back to, making sure you focus on, informing yourself with the information that you want from a reliable source who is unbiased, who isn't trying to sell you something necessarily. I realize that this is a book, and I'm not trying to sell you a book, but do you know what I mean? Like, not trying to sell you a product or a promise, I think is key.
And I just, in your defense, a research-backed book by a professional with decades, 15 years of experience is different.
It's a bit different. Yeah. I was like, I just realized we're talking about my book. I was like, no, I'm telling you.
Not the same.
Yeah. So it's difficult for parents, though. I feel, as a parent, I fully empathize with how challenging it can be to navigate all this information.
It is. You're right that our fear is being capitalized on, but I think it's not just fear. It's psychological tricks, right? It's marketing. It's
Yes.
coming from every direction. So there's this one side where we want quick fixes, right? We want an easy answer, and then we want to know everything that's in there. We want choice and control. We want all the information. Both wanting to know everything and wanting a quick fix.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's something I really talk to families about, because I when I approach food allergies with children and with parents, when we very first have a conversation, lots of people always say to me, like, as a dietitian, what's your one big overarching piece that you want people to hear? And I always talk to, my starting point with families is always that, when you get a food allergy diagnosis, all you hear is a lot of no, and your child hears over time a lot of no's, a lot of avoid, a lot of like safe, unsafe, big words, right? Big words, big emotions attached to those things. When we talk about those things, I always think of the words, interestingly, in my kind of feeding clinic, we've started to move away from safe and unsafe outside of the context of allergies, because when we say something is a safe food, the opposite to that would suggest it's not safe. And that's actually not entirely correct in the context. It's an accepted food versus one that's not yet accepted or not currently accepted. May never be accepted, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, different context with food allergy. And I always say my first bit of advice is, let's have a focus on foods your child can eat. But then we also, so I really am like, let's just shift a bit. Like, we know we've got to do the avoidance piece, but it can feel like so much is suddenly unavailable. Like you say, you go for anything.
Right.
Brands will put on the front of packaging, like, allergen friendly, I think is often the word, which isn't really like a legal term.
Regulated,
Right?
right.
It's just depending on what you're allergic to, right? Because it could say allergen friendly and it would be based very much on our kind of like top 14 allergens.
Right.
Um, but I've got lots of children now who are allergic to, I don't know, like pea, and that's finding its way into our food system a lot more pea proteins and isolates, and it might have, coconut and oats and stuff like that. These things are not considered to be allergens, and yet we're finding more and more children allergic to them. So, it's still nuanced, isn't it? But I think, as you say, there's for me, I always talk to parents about striking that balance between actually what I also want is to make sure that your child is getting the broad range of nutrients they need on a restricted diet. And that is very important because research shows that children who have got one or more food allergies are more likely to be deficient in certain like vitamins and minerals, micronutrients. Equally, alongside that, I want to make sure your child has the emotional and social experiences around food. So it has an element of foods that might be at birthday parties, that are therefore safe and they can be included. There's standard dietitian, always a middle ground for me, but I think it is really important parents are aware that actually across the board, we still want to be honing in on those principles of a balanced diet. We want to be going, well, actually, fruit is safe. Could we have a piece of fruit at a snack time rather than this thing that's multiple allergen friendly? Are we making sure that we're offering the right nutrients here rather than these snacks actually might be quite nutrient devoid, really? Or it might just be a bit of corn. Fine, we all grab those things on the go. As you say, there's no judgment that comes with this, but it's again just shifting that perspective to, are we actually making sure that we're offering the range of nutrients children need to grow and develop in the same way as their peers who don't have food allergies? And we know that it is harder. And so I can fully understand, like, I get it. I every year since I qualified and started working in food allergies, I'd accept myself a challenge for like 2 weeks to be like something free, just to see what it's like, try the new products. I like to be able to recommend things based on some actual experience. And, if it really doesn't, if this milk alternative doesn't work well to make mac and cheese, I don't want to say that it does, because it just feels disingenuous.
I love that.
Yeah. And every year I'm astounded by exactly that. And one thing always being like, oh my God, like this is every year I'm like, I forget how hard this is. God, my food shop takes 5 times. And I'm like, I see you, parents. I see you. I'm there. I'm like watching these people checking these labels, and I'm like, I see you. I know what you're up to. I absolutely see you. But with that, do you know what it always sort of come back to is going, well, actually, it would be really easy to rely on all of these other foods that are labeled as allergen friendly. Hold on a minute. I just need to go back to basics. I need to go to the fruit and veg aisle. I need to go and get some fish if I can have fish, or I can go get some meat. I need to go find some pulses in the tinned aisle. I need to go and find these nutrient dense foods that are reliable sources of nutrition. But I'm very aware that also relies a lot on feeling confident with how to cook. And there's lots of, I think maybe it's quite bold of me to say, I feel like it's quite a bit of a lost art. And maybe it's a lost art. Maybe it's that we don't have as much time anymore because often two parents are going back to work. And so, God, I feel it. My husband was away last week, and so I obviously had my daughter as well. And when there isn't one of you to look after her whilst the other one's like, in the kitchen, and, everyone's like, oh, just, they can help. And I'm like, have you seen a 2-year-old's attention span? Like, she's going to help. This dinner's got to be ready in 5 minutes. Otherwise, And so I think it's just absolutely, as parents, we will turn to convenience. We will turn to easier options. But I think sometimes it's worth taking that step back and going, hold on a minute. Is there anything else I can be adding in here? Anything else we can that's actually nutritionally dense? What can they eat? Oh yeah, God, we haven't been down this aisle for a while, or I'm just going to pick up a few more bags of frozen fruit and veg, that I can chuck into stuff throughout the week, and also just be aware of, over time, it's going to be about balancing. How do we also understand the impact of some of the other ingredients might be having, even on allergy risk? There's a really interesting paper that came out, was it last year? Don't quote me on the year, all about kind of use of ultra processed foods in and allergy risk factors. And actually, unsurprisingly, we know a diet higher in ultra processed foods seems to be, it's not causation because it never is, but correlated with kind of like the food allergy side of things. And we're very much looking into that more. And it isn't black and white. because there are lots of things. Ultra processed doesn't mean bad by all accounts. In
Right.
the UK, we rely a lot on, I always give fortified cereals, like as an example. Lots of the children in the UK, about most children will rely, I think it's the data's around like 20% of their iron requirements every day are met through fortified cereals. For me, that's a really important nutrient. And actually, for me, a really reliable source of nutrition that most children will eat most days. Can we make choices where, there's a little bit more fiber and a little bit less sugar and salt? Yes, please. That would be brilliant. But we're not going to label those foods as, it's not black and white bad. But actually, there's lots of research now sort of looking into, the impact of things like of certain emulsifiers on the gut microbiome. And it's this really complex interaction that really, if we're honest, when we think of it from a science perspective, are probably in our infancy of understanding. And now we're sort of starting to get those glimmers and the research money is moving. I think we will see more over time. But, my best bit of advice for parents is where you can, like, prioritize those whole foods, lots of those whole foods that will be allergen free, bar milk. I'm just going to caveat that milk allergy group there, are great. And again, just to sort of pull some research in again, there was yet another paper that includes a dietitian who I think is wonderful, Karina Venter, who was looking at dietary variety during weaning and allergy risk. And lots of the focus during weaning is that, we'll prevent allergies by getting those allergens in. Brilliant data behind that now. Absolutely, we should be doing that. But there is this body of evidence building behind, which is that actually, giving good variety, the more variety we add in, particularly of plant-based foods, so which my brain immediately goes, hello, gut microbiome, of plant-based foods during weaning, the more we reduce allergy risk overall too. So not just allergenic foods, just these whole foods, these plant-based foods. And that absolutely is going to be that mediation with that lovely community of gut bacteria that we have. And again, this isn't about dietitian says you must have 1,000 foods before one, because that isn't realistic or appropriate for all families or achievable, maybe even from a financial point of view. But it's about going, if I'm making a decision between X or Y, I'm going to go for this, a tinned beans versus, a baby snack kind of
Right.
puff. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I'm going to try and use that. Is there something easy? Is there an easy swap? Is there an easy change? What can I add? Rather than, that constant narrative we have of taking everything, taking out, take out, take out, take out.
Yes, I love that emphasis on what I can add, what we can
Mm.
give our bodies. The way that I phrase it with my kids and a lot of times with my clients is what you just said. What have you given your body today? Does your body need more that's fresh today? And how do you feel when you eat that versus how do you feel when you snacked on a giant
Yeah.
bag of salty pretzels, right? So I
Yeah.
love that. And I would love for you to expand more on what language you like to use around this, because the language we use affects our nervous system. The language we use shapes
Mm.
all of our beliefs about this. It's so important.
Yeah, and I think I love that. I talk to lots of families and about exactly that, like nutrition by addition. So sometimes the older children will get that, and I think we need to be careful with really how we talk around. It's different for parents and adults, but actually, when we're thinking about children, um, I will often, the early language we will start to be thinking about is what does that give? Like, this food gives us energy to play. Like, it needs to be relatable for that child. I will see parents, for context, again, I think I wrote this in the book, particularly when you're struggling to get a child to eat something, often we will use like a health halo on it. We'll be like, you need to eat the broccoli because it's good for you. And for a 2-year-old, that's a really abstract concept. Like, what do you mean good? Like, we know what we know. We're like, yes, it's a source of fiber, it's going to do this and it contains folate. Like, they don't, one, need to know that at this stage. Like, they don't, because they're not making their own decisions around food necessarily. And two, actually can add a lot of additional pressure, particularly when we're trying to, like, this idea, lots of parents are trying to get my child to eat, which is something I sort of try and steer away from anyway. That kind of mindset of kind of supporting is different to getting. So very much focusing for children on, like, what does it do for their body? And that as their age and their understanding increases can sort of change, saying to a toddler, this is a really good source of vitamin C, which means you might not get sick when you go to nursery. They're just like, in the moment, like, they're sensory motor learners. They're like, does it look, feel good? Do I
Right.
want to eat it? Yes or no? Right. But when you've got a child who's going to school, actually, you can be like, actually, this contains, a natural chemical that, or vitamin C, you can just label it what it is. And vitamin C is really good for our immune system. Our immune system help keeps out people we don't want to be here and help keeps us well. really like almost neutral, factual kind of language. And, I always say to parents when you're talking around food with children to consider like the three F's. So, um, fun for young children because they are imaginative, magical thinkers. Children they learn through play. They think it's hilarious if all of a sudden I did this at lunchtime today, because my daughter was like laughing at me because I had a piece of avocado and I said it was a lizard tongue. I was like, I got a green lizard tongue. I was just being silly. I was actually being silly because my husband was eating it, and I was like, what are you doing? And I was like, you've got a lizard tongue. Immediately, I've spoken her language around that food. It's exciting. It's different. Hold on a minute. We saw a lizard the other day when we went to the butterfly farm. Like, I can relate to this. I don't relate to nutrition education. I'm a toddler. And then so there's fun. There's factual, and that is very that's neutral. And I always say, things like delicious and tasty, which we often use to encourage, don't we? Try, it's delicious. And like that might work with your partner or your friends who are adults and they know you and you know each other's food preferences and but actually it's very, what does that mean? Like it means something different for everybody. Like delicious is, we know that it means that you like it, but it doesn't actually tell me anything about that food. So with older children, like that factual side of things, when they start to become more concrete thinkers, actually, this is a carbohydrate food. Carbohydrates give us energy to play. Or this is a fat's really good for our brain. Like lots of our brain is made of fat. That's actually just factual. And then I think the final thing really is fair. So fun, factual, and then fair. And I think that's always about thinking, if we are talking about food, is about being fair in terms of we're not using food as bribery. We're not negotiating, coercing, putting food on a pedestal because we're trying to get them to eat something. So we say you can have the ice cream because all of a sudden ice cream, even if, even it's delicious anyway, isn't it? There's me delicious. It's one, we all enjoy ice cream anyway. It's palatable. It's meant to be enjoyable. It's meant to be bought. It's meant to be enjoyed. It's good for the soul in so many ways. But by saying that if you do something, you can have it, immediately we started to notch it up on the desirability index, as I often call it. Like now it's something that I have to earn. Now it's something that's withheld. Now I want it more. We know that kind of forbidden fruitness can kind of, so fair is not using food in any of those ways, but also being really aware of, if you are talking around food to your children and you really, really want them to eat it, is now what you're saying solely for that purpose? Are you supporting them to feel comfortable around food? Are you educating? Is it feeling kind of we're having that conversation anyway? Or am I flooding you with things about this food because I'm trying to get you to eat it? I'm telling you it's good for you. It's going to grow you big and strong. That's why little Freddie in your class, I bet he eats his broccoli. That's no longer fair. That's starting to push over into that pressure, and goodbye nervous system for your child. You're like, the child's I'm okay. The child's I'm okay is just gone. Like,
Yep. Take the
and then
choice
you're okay is behind because you're going to be knocked that they're not eating it, and then goodbye figure of eight. I'm okay. You're okay. You're both not okay. We're going in a different zone here. So yeah, fun, factual, and fair, and then thinking very much about what it does for us and make it relatable to that child and their age. Nobody needs to be talking about like the Krebs cycle for carbohydrates.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love that. That was actually one of the notes that I had here about your book, because those mnemonics help us remember it, right? They help us prioritize. What am I doing here when I don't know what to say, or I am starting to get frustrated? Those are the things that bring us back into the moment of how did I want to approach this? What did Lucy say about?
What did Lucy say? I mean, the one thing I'll finish on is that the biggest language we can use when we're supporting children, if we want, if we're encouraging them in the way that we, all parents want their child to eat a healthy, balanced diet. I don't think there is a single parent I've ever met who wouldn't want that for them. And I think the thing to remember is, like, even with all these tips and tricks, the absolute best language is going to be what you're doing. Kids are going to do what they see. They're trusted adults. They're trusted, that they are going to look to you. They're favorite people in the whole world. And like, to finish on something really, really positive that I always use with parents, and you might have seen this on a video many moons ago, is that I often, when I've got children who are old enough in clinic, and whatever the context might be around their eating, might be the food allergy, might be selective eating, it might be both. I will say to the child, I'm really interested, if you could invite anyone for dinner tonight, who would you have dinner with? And parents sit there and they're like, every parent is like, oh, I was expecting Bluey, or I was expecting Spider-Man, or like insert appropriate thing. And I would say, in the last however many years of doing this, there's only a handful of children who haven't said, my parents. And I think that's just that you watch parents' faces. And actually, really famously, this was done. I only started doing this because it was a very famous, I think it was an advertisement, an Australian, where they did a similar thing. And I was like, interesting. But in that moment, it gives some parents something really, really important to latch onto, which is they want the time with you. It isn't about the food. I'm not asking them what they want to eat. I'm asking them, who do they want to spend that time with? And I think that really hones down into like connection can come first. Like, don't think about your meal perfection. Do not think about your healthy, balanced diet. And that is the goal of this mealtime. Actually, that will come often when children like coming to the mealtime and they get that connection from you. And the rest falls in place afterwards if you're offering it. And I think, as I say, we can be really preoccupied with that, the health bit being the balanced diet and the broccoli, whereas actually that comes often after we've got felt safety and connection and a nice place to be at the mealtime first.
That's just the perfect point to end on. The line that's often, it probably comes from Dan Siegel, connect before you correct.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's and that includes what we want our children to eat, right? If we want to offer them a variety of foods, connecting with them and eating them together, whether they try it or not. Yes, I love that.
Yeah. It's and it works, but it's it is a long game.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, please tell everybody where they can find you. They can find your book everywhere.
You can find my book everywhere, and I'm trying very much. We're in the process. I'm meeting my publisher tomorrow, actually, thinking about getting print over to the US. You can get it electronically over in the US at the moment, no problem. So you can find me on Instagram and on TikTok, because apparently I'm a TikToker now, at Children's Dietitian. And just a reminder for US folks, in the UK we spell dietitians, God, this might sound inappropriate, with tits, not ticks. So it's dietitian with a T. So the way everyone remembers it, they're like, you're a UK dietitian because you've got tits, not ticks. So I was like, okay, well, I won't forget that now. So you can find me, on Instagram, on TikTok. I've got a website. You can find my book, The Ultimate Guide to Children's Nutrition, in lots of places now. And say hello. Like, I'm very much a present professional who likes to meet the audience I'm speaking to and connect. So
I can attest to that. You responded so quickly when I reached out to you. I'm so excited about your book. I want to have you on the show, and boom, you're like, I'm in. So thank you so much for being so.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again so much to Lucy Upton for joining me for this episode, sharing all of your expertise and shedding light on the importance of embracing nutritional wellness in a healthy and confident way. As we wrap up, here are your 3 action steps that you can take. Number 1, follow Lucy as she hilariously explained the spelling. Her social media handle is at Children's Dietitian, DIETITIAN. Number 2, get your hands on Lucy's book. I'm in the US and many of my listeners are too. You can purchase it on Kindle. And if you're not, you're fortunate to be able to get a copy in your actual hands. It is absolutely worth the time. It is called The Ultimate Guide to Children's Nutrition: How to Nurture Happy, Healthy Eaters in the First 5 Years. This book is not just about what to feed your kids and when, but how, and how to make their relationship with food judgment-free. I will be buying the book for anyone I know and love who is having a child. Number 3, I would encourage you to just open the door to your pantry, to soak in everything that you've learned, everything that you have had to work around and accommodate and advocate for and protect. And just take stock of all of the hard work that you have done to get to whatever point in your food allergy journey you're at this point in time. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have any questions about your own medical experience or mental health needs, please consult a professional. I'm Dr. Amanda Whitehouse. Thanks for joining me. And until we chat again, remember, don't feed fear.